Hello. In this video, I'll show you how to set up the drawing feature using the AVE Publishing Interactivity tools. If you have all of your images ready, the drawing setup can be quite easy. All of the images that I'll be using have been prepared ahead of time to accelerate the pace of this video. Along the way, I'll show you how each image was set up using Photoshop. First, I'll create a new magazine project that's vertical. I'll start by placing a background image that the draw activity will appear over. Now, I'll place all the tool images. I'll place the paintbrush, the pencil, the eraser, and the fill tool. I'll also place the graphic of my color palette. All of these images are PNG files with transparency. This is what the paintbrush looks like in Photoshop. Now I'll draw the frame for the illustration. You don't need to actually add a graphic here, but it's a good practice since that is what you'll see in the thumbnail previews of the page. I'll place the Little Red Riding Hood illustration. I'm also going to name this object in the Layers panel. If you name your objects, as you select them in the Interactivity panel, the name will appear. This helps you visually know you are picking the correct frame. I'll name this frame Draw Activity. This image is a PNG with transparency. It is important to note that all the lines are connected and the shapes are well defined. If you try to use the Fill tool with open shapes, you will fill out of the lines. Now that the tools and the illustration have been set, we can add the interactivity. I'll start by selecting the illustration. Next, I'll get out the AVE Interactivity panel, and I'll select the Draw feature. I need to define the default color brush. This should match all the other default color brushes I'll make later on. First, I'll define the image I want to color. In the Color Pictures list, I'll define the coloring picture by clicking on the folder to the right of Picture Path. The alpha tolerance of the image gives you more control over the fill options. To make the fill, we have to know if we include the semi-transparent part of the overlay or not. If your image contains a thin line, some part of that line could be semi-transparent, and the fill wouldn't work as you expected. You can correct that with this alpha tolerance. When the alpha tolerance is set to 50%, the half-transparent pixels will be filled. When this is set to 0, just the transparent pixels will be filled. Now that I have an image to color, I can define the default brush. Under the Default Brush section, I'll first choose the brush image. This image defines the shape and hardness or softness of the brush. This is what my brush file looks like in Photoshop. Next, you can set the size of your default brush. I'll set mine to 25 to be a larger brush. I'll set my opacity to 1 and my spacing to 5. I'll also check Draw Assistance. When Draw Assistance is turned on, you can only color with a brush inside a shape. Therefore, you can't color outside the lines. You'll notice that these brush settings are similar to Photoshop's brush settings. Now that I've defined my default brush for the illustration, I can define the tools. I'll start by selecting the color palette. The color palette is defined by choosing the color picker Enrichment in the AVE Interactivity panel. The option to continuously update color means that if you click and drag your finger on a tablet, the color will continuously change. When this is not selected, color only changes on click. I'll check this option. Next, I'll select the paintbrush. I'll choose Advanced Button as the enrichment. I'll set the action to tell the frame using the frame picker. Then I'll set the frame as the picture of Little Red Riding Hood. The action to execute will be defined as Change Brush. Essentially, this is a button that tells the image which tool it is now using. Under Default Brush, I'll change the brush size to match the size of the default brush I already defined in the Draw Enrichment. I'll also check Drawer Assistance. Now I'll define the selected state. Since the paintbrush will be the selected tool, I'll check Selected. When this tool is selected, the selected state can have a different appearance. This is what the selected state of the brush looks like in Photoshop. Notice the outline. All of your tools for an illustration must have the same exclusion channel number. This means that when one tool is in a selected state, all the other tools are set to unselected automatically. To further understand this feature, think about the way that the tool panel works in InDesign. When you select the Direct Selection tool, it appears selected, and all other tools that were previously selected are set to unselected. We control that option through the exclusion channel. The overlay layer is a defined area that will update the current chosen color over whatever you have defined as a brush or drawing tool. I'll select brush 3 for my image path, and I'll pick a color. This is what the overlay layer looks like in Photoshop. Notice how only the tip of the brush and the handle are defined. The color overlay feature will update the color in these areas based on the shapes defined in this file. Now that the brush is done, I'll define the pencil. I'll select the pencil, then I'll choose the Advanced button. I'll define the action using the frame picker and pick the Little Red Riding Hood image. The action to execute will be defined as Change Brush. Under Default Brush, I'll first choose the file for the brush path. This is how the smaller pencil brush looks in Photoshop. Notice how the size and shape of the brush is smaller, and the edges are harder, like writing with a pen or a pencil. I'll define this brush size as 8, change the opacity to 1, set my spacing to 2, and check Drawer Assistance. Under the Selected State options, I won't check Selected because this is not the default selected brush. I'll choose the image for the selected state of the pencil. This exclusion channel is already set to 0, just like the brush, so I won't change that setting. For the overlay layer, I'll choose the overlay image I've already created and pick the default color. This is what the overlay layer looks like in Photoshop. Now I'll define the eraser. First I'll select it, and then choose Advanced button. I'll pick the Little Red Riding Hood frame, and assign the action to execute Erase. I'll set the brush path to the default brush, which I already previously used for the brush tip. I'll set the brush size to 25, the opacity to 1, and the spacing to 5, and check Drawer Assist. For the selected state, I'll choose the image of Eraser 2, and I'll leave the exclusion channel set to 0. We don't need an overlay layer because this is the eraser and it doesn't need to be filled with any color. Now I'll define the Fill tool. First I'll select the Fill graphic, then I'll set this as an Advanced button. I'll pick the Little Red Riding Hood frame and set the action to Fill. You'll notice that there is no area to define the brush size. That's because this tool will fill shapes and no brush needs to be defined. I'll choose the image I've already made as the selected state. I'll also choose the color overlay image as well, and define the default color of this fill. Now that all tools are set up, we can preview the interaction in my kiosk. I'll save the document and build the preview. With the brush tool, I can paint with a larger, fuzzy brush based on the brush image I defined and the size. With the pencil tool, I can draw with a smaller, more concise tip. The eraser tool erases, and the Fill tool will fill. As I click and drag over the swatches area, the color of my tools update based on the overlay images I defined. If I choose a different color, I can now use the tools with that color. Let's take a look at a few more things we can do with this interactivity. First, I'll select the Little Red Riding Hood image again. In the Interactivity panel, I can set this image to erase when shaken. This means that when you shake your tablet, the coloring you've done will erase just like an Etch-a-Sketch. You can also add multiple images within this drawing feature, and also define buttons to navigate you to the next illustration. You can add another coloring picture by clicking on the plus sign. I'll add 3 more illustrations. Now I'll add 2 more buttons to navigate to the previous and next illustrations. I'll select the button that points to the right and assign Load Next Picture. I'll then select the button pointing to the left and assign Load Previous Picture. Now, I'll save the file and generate another preview. I can now use the previous and next buttons to navigate to other illustrations that I can color. I hope this video helps you understand how all of these tools can be configured to work together to create engaging, interactive experiences for your readers. Have fun exploring Draw in the AVE digital publishing platform. Thanks for watching.